Hey everyone, my name is JT Solis. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mayani, and I'm here to talk about e-commerce in the Philippines from the lens of an agri-fishery startup founder through the lens of Mayani. I'm going to be covering insights, impact, and imperatives for this particular sector and how we're going to ground it within the sector that we're operating in. Way back in 2017, I had the first-hand experience of what it takes to look at the e-commerce sector. And I was at that point where literally the rubber hits the road in which we call e-commerce logistics. When I was heading business development and partnerships for Send, I saw that e-commerce entrepreneurs were actually popping up every day. We were literally shipping out tens of thousands of e-commerce parcels coming from online entrepreneurs of all forms, shapes, and sizes. We're talking about social sellers, we're talking about marketplace sellers, we're talking about e-tailers. But if you fast forward to 2019, my perspective on e-commerce then became strikingly different from the e-commerce perspective I had way back in 2017. All of a sudden, when I founded my startup, the agri-fisheries platform, Mayani, I actually started seeing what e-commerce means to the social sidelines and what e-commerce is for those people who are actually marginalized. In this picture, you can actually see the face of a farmer. His name is Ka Felix. He's a member of a cooperative called the Malarohatan Family Farm Association in Lian, Batangas. That's in southern Luzon. For them, e-commerce is a far outcry from the e-commerce we've been accustomed to, maybe in the cities, in Metro Manila, the National Capital Region. For them, e-commerce simply means the internet. And the promise that it holds is actually complicated for them. They don't know what's the potential of it. They don't know all those growth rates. They don't know what all those seminal reports actually talk about when it comes to the explosive growth of e-commerce. What's ironic in the situation of e-commerce in the Philippines is that while we are indeed the fastest growing internet economy in the entire Southeast Asian region, we could still see a lot of people, those in the social sidelines, those that are marginalized, the likes of Ka Felix, the farmers, the fisher folks, who are actually left behind when it comes to the leveraging of technology. It is within this context that I would like to ground this entire conversation around e-commerce in the Philippines and see it from the lens of a startup founder like me. Google, Temasek, and Bain & Company released this wonderful report back in 2021 called the Economy Report for Southeast Asia. And what you can see in here is that the 2021 internet economy for the Philippines doubled to billions of dollars, right? And I think beyond the academic confines of these reports, you could see that maybe in terms of rural Philippines, we have yet to see how we are actually leveraging e-commerce for good. In our quest for breaking what we call the glass ceiling, because we are involved in the agriculture sector, I would like to hone in on a couple of questions for this particular talk. The first one is, how did we leverage e-commerce and technology for good, particularly for the likes of Ka Felix, the smallholder farmers, and the fisher folks? Secondly, what lessons did we learn? And third, are there e-commerce imperatives that we need to be able to index on so we can drive more positive, more measurable, and more tangible impact, especially in rural Philippines? The first lesson I'd like to share with you guys is that we think that the litmus test of e-commerce and its equalizing power is in inclusive access with income. The operative word here would always be inclusive access with income. In the pictures in there, you can actually see some of the activities we've been doing as an agri-fisheries platform. We've always been about the 10 million smallholder farmers in the Philippines, the 1 million smallholder fisher folks in a country that is inherently maritime in nature. We have over 34,000 kilometers of coastline, perhaps one of the world's longest discontinuous coastline. A huge section of our population, particularly fisher folks, actually live below $1 per day. What we have seen firsthand as an agri-fisheries platform is that if technology is really seen as an equalizer, as a tool that can level the playing field, we think that we need to go beyond access. There has to be a measurable impact on the personal bottom lines of these people in the social sidelines. And this is the reason why the lesson we've learned in here has always been inclusive access with income. Our promise for these smallholder farmers have always been about how do we boost rural incomes and how do we make sure that technology is there to facilitate those necessary market linkage so they can have stable livelihood, they can have stability and boosted incomes, and at the same time that sort of spills over towards the different needs of the households that they have, i.e. sending their kids to school, i.e. providing that emergency cash that they need in terms of external shocks, i.e. the pandemic. The second insight that I would like to share is that we need to be able to humanize problem solving as the centerpiece of innovation. I think one of the things that every technopreneur would always be vulnerable to has always been falling in love with his or her technology product. We have to recognize, however, that there are certain humanized insights that propel the creation of these technology platforms and products. I'd like to give a concrete example. In this picture, you've been seeing community gatherings and community engagement meetings that we have with fisher folks. Those are actual fisher folks from Botolan in Zambales. You can also see in the far right our co-founder and chief farmer, Ochi, holding a jackfruit and a couple of produce and harvest coming from southern Luzon. On the left, you can see also a farmer in Lian, Batangas, dealing and engaged, utilizing what we call our app, our Farmer's Companion. Beyond the development of these technologies simply to innovate, we think that to be able to drive measurable and tangible income and impact in terms of these technological innovations, we need to be able to see what are those humanized problems that we're addressing, what are those pain points, what are those challenges. That way, the way we're crafting innovation would be more relevant, would be more accustomed to the nuances of these realities. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation actually cited at one point that farmers farm because they want to be able to turn their crops into cash. It is that simple, but it's also that difficult when it comes to addressing these problems and building the innovations and the technological breakthroughs around it. We feel that this is one of the imperatives in the agri-fishery sector, and where e-commerce holds true potential is in our ability to humanize that problem solving. The third insight we would like to share in here, based on our experience, is that without traction coupled with scale, there is no impact. As an impact-driven agri-fisheries platform, we think that to be able to drive positive rural incomes for all those smallholder farmers and fisher folks, to be able to create that meaningful dent in their lives, we need to be able to keep linking them to the market and link them in a very dependable, efficient, and optimized way. What you're going to be seeing here in these pictures would be how we're moving truckloads and truckloads of fresh produce and agriculture products from different parts of the country, working hand in hand with different stakeholders, working hand in hand with a lot of institutional buyers, working hand in hand with a lot of retail customers. This for us is the true power of e-commerce. We have seen in the region in Southeast Asia how different platforms like Grab, Gojek, which is eventually listed as Goto in Indonesia, e-fisheries also in Indonesia, and a lot of these platforms were able to drive numbers for the economy, was able to tangibly contribute to socioeconomic development, even in the case of the Philippines, because they were able to keep their traction going and in an uptrend manner. For us, this is what e-commerce holds for the Philippines. If we are able to combine what we think is very modern to something that is otherwise thought to be very traditional, very archaic, such as Philippine agriculture, I think that's where we can see a lot of strides. The last insight I'd like to share is that we can actually harness e-commerce as a rallying point and a convergence point for ecosystem building. Platforms are good because they're scalable, they're dependable, they're replicable. For business models that are anchored on platforms, you can actually evolve the use cases for those platforms. E-commerce platforms, for instance, like the ones Lazada, Shopee, for instance, have been utilized as not just as vehicles for change, but also as platforms for mobilizing the community and gaining their support for causes that matter to them. In here, you could see actual examples of how we have engaged different stakeholders, the likes of Caritas Manila, the social development arm of the Catholic Church, the likes of Aboitiz Foundation, Filipino Shell Foundation, Save the Children, or even the global publisher, right there, how we were able to leverage the power of technology to be able to rally communities around specific causes that matter to them. In e-commerce, this has gone beyond just buying physical goods for the interest and the benefit of just one person. In here, you could see how e-commerce has evolved over time so that it can also impact others, not just for your personal benefit. These are tangible examples, and I'm citing it because it's possible and it has been done. We think that overall, e-commerce in the Philippines is still at its nascency stage. We think that while it is still very young, it does hold a lot, especially for one sector that is now considered of the national economic. The agri-fishery sector may be traditional, it may have been considered archaic, very inefficient, but if we are able to leverage and index on the power of technology, particularly e-commerce, in a country that is now considered the fastest growing internet economy in the region, we think we can do a lot of good. We think that we can positively impact a lot of lives. The last slide in here, I'm sharing to you my email address. If you would like to reach out and touch base and share more insights on e-commerce, other insights, imperatives, and inroads around this space, feel free to drop us a note.